Communications Radio Network proudly presents The Alex Jones Show, because there's a war on for your mind.
We are live. It is Wednesday, the 20th day of October 2010. We're going to go over the political news, the economic news, the rioting going on all over the Western world. The mainstream corporate media here saying, is it coming to the shores of the United States? Will Americans get mad at having their pension funds taken and taxed? Will they get mad at their dollar being devalued? That is all coming up. And I want to just go ahead now and throw the toll-free number out. We're going to take a lot of calls throughout the full 4 hours today. 1-800-259-9231. 1-800-259-9231. And we will get you up and on the air. I particularly want to hear from military and police currently who are serving, police officers or military or veterans. I know there's been military training going back 100 years for riot control. We know about the bonus strikers in front of the White House from World War I wanting to get their bonus money they were promised under law, being ridden down by Patton and MacArthur when they were young colonels. They got promoted for that. But this is a systemic creeping death, a quiet, covert operation of massive scale to take over every town and city and to take over every local government, and that is now publicly admitted. We were able to decipher the intelligence information we had back in the mid-1990s and correctly forecast exactly what we're facing. Not just what the military is being trained to do and openly being announced now, but what the cause and the cover trigger for that would be a banking crisis engineered by the globalists. And so here we are today, and it's now getting a lot of attention. I told you last week how the reports in local news around the country that we boiled down and put in a PrisonPlanet.com article got a lot of attention, nationally and even locally, because reporters and talk show hosts could just read Paul Watson's article and see where the Army admitted they're preparing to take over every town and city during the economic collapse. And in the latest articles written by Paul Watson, we have links to the Army's own memorandum where they believe there is going to be a total collapse. But, of course, they don't point out that their banker masters are the ones that engineered it. The Drudge Report, of course, picked up our Will Americans Follow French example of mass civil unrest. Yesterday and today, Time magazine headline, Will the Federal Reserve Cause a Civil War? And so I'm going to be detailing this throughout the next 2 hours. And then we're going to, for 2 hours, look at one of the major contributing future triggers and current triggers for this, but it just continues to unfold. And that is the galactic-sized, unbelievably off-the-chart, naked banking mortgage fraud by the Big Six. Any small bank trying to engage in this fraud, of course, their directors are hauled up before a federal grand jury and they're sent to prison. But that is not the case by the big mega banks that have engineered this situation. We'll also be looking at the latest developments headed into the November election, less than 2 weeks away as well. So let's go ahead and get into that right now. Then we'll open the phones up on this subject and a lot more. Here we go. Will Americans follow French example of mass civil unrest, or will the sleeping middle class continue to scratch their hind ends and watch Dancing with the Stars? That's a nice headline by Paul Joseph Watson. And then there's the, I shouldn't laugh about this. Watson has a little penchant for throwing things in like that. I've told him not to. But hey, Drudge Report's picking it up. He must know what he's doing. Time magazine is a related story. Posted up in the top of the article. Time magazine, prospect of civil war in U.S. doesn't seem that far-fetched. That's our newest article on it. How will Americans react when the government begins to impose the same austerity measures that are causing riots, street battles, fuel blockades, and other assorted chaos in France? Will we witness mass civil unrest, or will the sleeping middle class continue to watch Dancing with the Stars? It goes on, back in June, we forecast that the imminent onset of so-called austerity measures, which in reality represent nothing more than an elevated phase of government run looting on the taxpayer would herald an age of rage, leading to riots and revolutions as people react with fury in response to their jobs, savings, basic public services, pensions, and welfare money being seized by financial terrorists who caused the economic collapse in the first place. That's what we forecast in June. 4 months later, and citizens of one of the most prosperous countries in the world with the highest standard of living have shut down France after 6+ days of strikes and protest in response to the government plans to raise the retirement age from 60 to 62 and the full state pension age from 65 to 67. And if they get away with that, they'll raise it to 75, as Boehner was proposing last week, John Boehner of Michigan. Undoubtedly, there are two different protests occurring in France. The more violent scenes are the work of rent-a-mob anarchist youths who could care less about pensions but will waste no opportunity to don black hoods and pointlessly smash up shop windows in demonstrations against capitalism. Of course, they caught them last year in Greece. Mainstream news admitted the police dressed up like anarchists knocking out shop windows to make the protesters look bad. But we ought to pull that back up. Watson ought to add that to this article. When in reality, government seizure of pensions has all the hallmarks of a command and control socialism and nothing to do with true free market capitalism. These youths are also more concerned about their welfare checks being cut, but they won't garner sympathy of the rest of the French people by taking baseball bats to Starbucks forecourts in mocked-up media stunts. The legitimate protests and the ones that are genuinely hurt by the establishment and put the idiot anarchists to shame are being run by French workers, truck drivers, and union leaders and enjoy the support of around 70%, some polls say 80+% of the population. Over 1,000 gas stations have now run out of fuel across France, with strategic reserves set to run out in just a few weeks. Flights and trains have been disrupted. Organized slowdowns have snarled highway traffic. The French are showing Americans how it should be done, but uniting peacefully to shut down an entire country. This is genuine people power. The French are sending a message to the establishment that they will no longer play ball until the looting stops. And it continues. Will the rent-a-mob anarchists stage similar violent riots in America, or will the middle class embrace a much more legitimate backlash in the same vein of the union protesters in France? Will the Obama administration set to seize 401k pensions and turn them over to the Social Security Administration? How long will it be before Americans stir from their slumber and realize that their economic future and also that of their children is in immediate peril? When will Americans begin to understand that the onset of another government bailout in the form of quantitative easing 2 represents the biggest bank robbery in history? Just how distracted, dumbed down, fat, lazy has the American middle class become to prevent them from realizing a threat when they see it? British historian Simon Schama predicts not only will widespread civil unrest in America, but even a potential revolution if the elite allow the situation to spiral out of control. He notes that Obama will have to ditch misplaced obligations of civility and become an authoritarian enforcer in order to emerge successfully against the rising tide of constitutionalist rage that will be directed against the coming austerity fascism. And it continues here. As we documented in our article, the kind of public spending cuts, tax increases, salary caps, and retirement crackdowns that are now about to be implemented outstrip anything we've witnessed before in modern history. A lot of it's already been implemented, actually. If the American middle class reacts to the total banker takeover by collectively scratching their hind ends and flipping the TV channel, the country as we know it is probably gone for good. However, if Americans follow the example of the French and send a clear signal to the elite that they will refuse to participate in a rigged game, the true revolution that will restore both political and economic freedom and prosperity will be set in motion. Will Americans buying silver to protect their savings and guns to protect themselves in record numbers? It seems that the message is at least getting through to some of the people, but until we see mass walkouts, blockades, and other acts of nonviolent mass protest, disobedience, the establishment will continue to move forward with an onslaught after onslaught of financial pillaging. Numerous forecasters, governments, spy agencies, and international bodies are predicting mass riots and unrest in response to the worsening economic picture. In November of 2008, right as the economic implosion was unraveling, the U.S. Army War College released a white paper called Known Unknowns, Unconventional Strategic Shocks in Defense Strategy Development. The report warns the military must be prepared for a violent strategic dislocation inside the United States, which will be provoked by unforeseen economic collapse. Yes, unforeseen, their bosses engineered it. Purposeful domestic resistance, pervasive public health emergencies, or loss of functioning political and legal order. The widespread civil disobedience, the document said, would force the defense establishment to reorient priorities in extremis to defend basic domestic order and human security. So that's the sales pitch right there. Oh, we don't know what caused this collapse, but the people aren't going to like losing everything, and so we're your only hope with basically martial law to keep you safe. It goes on. A British Ministry of Defense report struck a similar tone when it predicted, this was 3 years ago, that within 30 years, the growing gap between the rich and the middle class, along with the urban underclass threatening social order, would mean the world's middle class might unite, using access to knowledge, resources, and skills to shape transnational process in their own class interest, and in the classes could become a revolutionary class. Again, the middle class could become a revolutionary class. And then we have some videos posted under that. Now that's Watson's article about it yesterday. Here is Time Magazine today, and we're going to cover this when we come back. Will the Federal Reserve cause a civil war? Will the Federal Reserve cause a civil war? And then an even more detailed article than what Paul wrote yesterday, dealing with this latest headline. Time Magazine, prospect of civil war in U.S. doesn't seem that far-fetched. This is a very complex issue. We're going to break it down on the other side, but they're getting us ready for it.